Hi there. I have never done a YouTube live, so bear with me. But I am Erin. I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner and certified lactation counselor. I focus a lot on starting solids, feeding babies without judgment. So I am a nurse practitioner and I work in clinic, and I also provide lactation support. So, one of the big questions that I get from a lot of families is, what do I do about starting solids? And if I don't want to do traditional purees, what is the best way to go? So it's truly nuanced, and every family will be different of what they feel comfortable with. So while some families feel really good about starting with purees, and that is totally fine, there are a lot of other families who would like to just go for the modified foods that they're eating. Most of the time, either way is fine, but I am going to go over different things to help you make confident feeding decisions so you can decide, okay, do I want to do purees for a little bit longer, or do I feel comfortable starting finger foods? So, I do just like to make a caveat before starting that social media platforms very much differ when it comes to what they promote your baby should be eating and what is best. So it's very much you figuring out what is best for your family. So I notice trends because one, I'm on social media, and two, I'm in clinic. I noticed the trend that baby led weaning is like all the rage on Instagram, and everybody follows solid starts, and then they have these feelings that their baby should be eating like crawfish at 6 months, and it's just not necessarily true, though I think the premises of solid starts are really good. And then on TikTok, every time I post something about baby led weaning, I get people being like, "Yeah, of course your baby is choking because uh, yeah, you're giving them solid food." So I'm just here to present the different sides and help you make these confident feeding decisions. So, when we're starting to think about solid foods and purees versus baby led weaning, always make sure your pediatric provider gives you the go ahead to start solids. It's based on signs of readiness, and the signs of readiness usually show up somewhere between 4 months, but I often see it somewhere between 5 to maybe 7 months. So I want you to feel really good about the signs of readiness before starting baby led weaning. So while they're the same, I always like to say to start baby led weaning, your baby needs to truly master all of these different signs of readiness. So, where the starting purees, your provider might say, okay, your baby has head control. So, if they're propped in their high chair, they are able to sit upright for most of the feed. I always just think like it's really hard to feed and eat if you are sideways like this. But we want to make sure your baby can sit upright for the duration of the feed. Now, if you are starting baby led weaning, they need to be able to sit there for as long as there is solid foods on their tray. And if they're not, sitting upright, it is a choking risk and it's harder to process the food in the mouth and mash it between the tongue and the roof of the mouth. So I like to make sure they are truly sitting upright and able to sit upright for the entire feed. And if they're doing baby led weaning, I would like them to be unpropped. While in purees, they might be able to be propped, but they should be able to sit up for the duration of the feed. I always think like it is very hard to get a baby to eat solid foods if your baby is not interested in solid foods. So if you are doing baby led weaning, your baby truly has to show interest in what they're eating because you are never feeding them with a spoon, so putting the food in their mouth as you are with purees often. Whereas with baby led weaning, your baby is picking the food off the tray and putting it in their mouth. So if they're not interested, they might touch it a little bit and play with it, but chances are they're not actually going to eat it. So showing interest in actually eating, and so following you when you're eating food, that is all very important before starting baby led weaning. Um, then let's see. So they have to also be able to, with that, grasp food. So with baby led weaning, it is the palmar grasp, so using open hand or palm to grasp food and then bring it up to their mouth and then process the food in the mouth and then swallow. So all of those need to be mastered before they start solid foods. Whereas with purees, yes, it's a little bit thicker than breast milk or formula, but if you put a spoon in your baby's mouth, they will more so sometimes like push the food out, um, make funny faces, spit it out like that. Those are all normal things for your baby to do when starting pureed food. So it's oftentimes you need to completely just embrace the that everything is exposure and that's okay. So we're talking about really good head control, being interested in solid food. Um, there's some requirements that they talk about doubling birth weight, but I think it's more so just like the readiness and getting your pediatrician's blessing. So let's say you're feeling very, very solid with your head control. They are ready to eat. They are tracking your food, and that is all great. And you're like, I am ready to go. So, what are the principles behind baby led weaning? Well, I talked about a few of them. So, one of the main principles of baby led weaning is that you are never making your baby eat food. It's always them guiding the food exploration and actually putting the food into the mouth and swallowing the food. So you are offering a variety of foods or one food, however you want to start, on their tray. And then they are picking up the food and putting it in their mouth or exploring the food or smelling the food or doing whatever they want to do. But you, if they're not interested or they swipe it off their tray, then you are stopping. So some babies may eat a lot right away, but a lot of times it takes a couple explorations of these different foods and getting the premises down before they actually start processing the food. Um, when babies are not necessarily able to grasp the food, so the pincer grasp, which happens at around 9 months, um, sometimes a little bit before and sometimes a little bit after, babies should be able to grasp the food with the palm of their hand and kind of scoop it up. And so what it looks like is that sometimes they just grasp the food and like shove it in their mouth or bring it to their face or they drop all the food on the way to their mouth. That is all very normal. But since babies do not have the pincer grasp, the fine motor skills to be able to grasp the food, that they need larger pieces of soft food to be able to process the food and eat it. So before they get their pincer grasp, food should be like 1 finger length long and wide. So it might be more like your pinky, but they're more like soft wedges that they grasp and put to their mouth. Otherwise, after they get to around 9 months or when their little pincer grasp develops, then you can start cutting them a little bit smaller into just these little teeny bite-sized pieces. So those would be the big main principles. And then the overall goal would be to introduce a variety of textures and flavors before your baby turns into a picky toddler. And some babies do not become picky, and some babies do. And that's very, very normal. So don't feel like, hey, my baby ate everything I put in front of me and now they're really like very selective. That is pretty normal and a lot of it depends on temperament. So just be aware that everything is in the realm of normal. And it is also in the realm of normal for your baby to not want to necessarily eat right away, to have to learn and watch you and see what to do and model, and you're modeling the behavior that you want because that's how your babies learn. So, those are the general principles. Now, one of the big things, and this is kind of a fast live, so I don't want to take too much of your time because I know your time is precious. The one of the big things that parents ask about when starting solid foods is the texture, or can you give textures? Does it need to be um do you need to change the food in any sort of way to feed it to your baby aside from just cutting it how it's supposed to be cut? Um, I always like to think of it this way. You're the food that you should be serving your baby should be able to be mashed in between their gum line and the roof of their mouth, or their tongue and the roof of their mouth. So they're not necessarily chewing like we think it is. They are processing the food. So either the food needs to become softer when it mixes with saliva, or baby needs to be able to mash the food. So I always like to stick with that like softer textured food and then add in a little bit more texture to it versus offering really hard food that's hard to be manipulated. There are lots of guides on choking risk foods. I know a lot of times we see babies on the internet eating like turkey drumsticks, and I think you need to go with your comfort level here. Like, to me, if your baby gets a piece of a turkey drumstick, that is a chunk of meat, and that is a choking risk. So I personally waited until a little bit later to do anything that I would have deemed a choking risk, and I think it's a lot of your comfortability and how you feel handling a potentially life-threatening situation. So that makes me want to lead into this like choking versus gagging. And then I'm going to tell you a personal story about my son when he choked. So gagging is very, very common when starting solids, whether it's purees, but more common with offering solid foods or finger foods. Choking is often loud, red, coughing, um, and the baby's it's protective, so it's making sure the baby is moving the food from this choking to actually getting the food up to a place where they can process it a little bit better. So while gagging is not uncommon, and though it's scary for a parent, like, it is really hard not to react when your baby is choking, or when your baby is gagging. Um, but it's really truly protective. So how you know it's gagging versus choking is that loudness, the redness, their eyes start to water a little bit. When a baby is choking, the number one thing that I knew the choking versus the gagging is when my son choked on a piece of pasta that was cut correctly. He looked so fearful. Like, his eyes were not necessarily watering, they were just so fearful. And I knew right away, like, this is not gagging. So he had the fear. It went from like coughing a little bit to completely silent and more like almost not necessarily wheezing, but like like this. And I'm like, okay, now it is time to react. And I have done CPR on humans before as a nurse, and it is nothing like doing the back blows to your baby. So, what I did is got him out of his high chair as fast as I could and turned him upside down and then did the back blow. And then the piece of pasta came out. We both cried a whole lot. I also at the same time called my husband and I'm like, you need to get here. And so he came running down the hallway, and luckily it was out before my husband even got to the kitchen. And this is why we never want to leave babies alone in the high chair while they're eating, even if it seems really low risk. So trust your instinct, do your CPR class, do know what to do if your baby is choking, and practice. You don't necessarily have to do the back blows, but just know what it's like to take the tray off, take your baby out, move them down, move them up, and they'll think it's a game. It's going to be kind of fun for them, and then it makes you feel more confident in knowing what to do. So those are the big takeaways with baby-led weaning, signs of readiness, and then the overlying principles of baby-led weaning. The truth is you don't necessarily have to do baby-led weaning to reach the goal of exposure to a lot of variety of textures and a lot of variety of flavors. There are ways to do it with puree, but sooner or later, of course, we are going to want your baby to start solid foods and start trying finger foods. So At the latest, generally around 10 months, but a little bit earlier after you get the go ahead from your pediatric provider. If you have any questions, you can feel free to leave them in a comment. Make sure to subscribe because I'm going to be offering a lot of variety of different pediatric information that I share with a lot of families when I'm working in clinic, and then also a lot of lactation, formula feeding, and starting solids, and then toddler feeding. So I appreciate your time because I know it is so valuable. And make sure to hit subscribe. Bye bye.